Melanie. I'm the project coordinator for Braids for AIDS, and I'm here to have a conversation to raise awareness around HIV/AIDS and how we can prevent that. So part of the conversation that we're going to have today is about sexual consent. Now, I've had the conversation a lot of times with predominantly females and getting their perspective on what consent actually is and what society paints the picture of what that looks like. So I kind of just wanted to get a feel for what everyone's opinion on the things that society says about what consent is when we're talking about sex, right? So it could be stuff like, what is a female wearing, or where is she going? What are the circumstances around someone being able to or not giving consent when it comes to sex? So I just kind of wanted to get everyone's feedback on, what are their experiences, or what are your thoughts around that?
Consent is yes or no. Clothes, going over somebody's house, where you're at does not matter. It's yes or no. If I say yes, then we can do it. If I say no, no. I don't see what's so difficult about that.
It's very clear, very simple.
Even if I were to make out with you, that doesn't mean I want to go any further. If I say no, it's no. And if you force it, then you deserve to get the consequences that come with it.
Wow, straight up. I mean, I don't know how else to. You put it in the most simplest way, but I think for some people it could be complicated. I don't know why exactly. It should be that simple, but I get the sense that there's a lot of circumstances and situations where if something happens, when we're talking about sexual violence, a lot of times when something doesn't go the way it's supposed to go, where in the ideal situation there's supposed to be consent and it's supposed to be clear, it's supposed to be consistent, constant, that doesn't always happen. Because as you said, right, sometimes you're wearing something, sometimes you're saying that, you went to the person's house or went to a party, or you're making out, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm okay with everything else that follows. Yeah. So that's kind of like what I hear a lot of females kind of experience. Do males experience consent in a different way, or are there pressures to around consenting when you're also being in your relationships? Does it look the same? Does it look different?
From my experiences, males just want to do it. I've never heard of a story where a male was to say no. It's always yes. I don't know why. It's always the female making the decision of yes or no, or her not wanting to do it. I've never seen a boy in that position.
Okay. So that would kind of be assumed that guys always initiate?
Yeah.
Or they're always wanting to have sex? Is that necessarily true?
No. It's just what we see most of the time.
Yeah. I also feel like sometimes when the girl does say no or whatever, and if you keep on saying no, it's still a pressure and it makes the girl feel guilty. So she's like, oh, usually they'll be like, oh, look what you did to me. And make you feel pressured and be like, now you feel like you're like a pity. You pity them.
In your opinion, how can you go into a situation being a little bit more, what are some things that affect your ability to say no, or to say I'm not comfortable with what's happening?
Abuse. Getting hurt. Being told that you'll get hurt if you don't proceed to do what I want you to do. Yeah, things like that.
Right. Wow. So pressure from the person that you're with, maybe pressure from friends. If the person is violent, if they're controlling, if they're pressuring you.
Or even being under the influence can get you to say yes, being under the influence of alcohol or any type of drug.
I think that's a huge one, because I think that a lot of times, regardless of what age you are, I think that sometimes we don't necessarily think about the fact that we may be smoking or drinking, or how that plays a factor into whether or not we have the ability to say no.
Yeah, if she's not sober and she says yes, that's not saying yes, because she's not sober enough to make that decision.
Absolutely. So consent also includes being conscious, right? So conscious meaning, are you high? Are you drunk? Are you sleeping? The whole topic of being high or being drunk, that comes up a lot. But what about if you're sleeping? Is is that okay for, like, let's say your partner to kind of wake you up kind of in the middle of the night and assume that because you guys are together when you're in a relationship?
No, because I know when I wake up, like, when my mom wakes me up in the morning, I do not know what's going on. Sometimes I don't even know it's her. So no, that doesn't, you're still not in the proper mindset. It's the same as being high. Like when you first wake up, you're not fully conscious. So no, saying yes in that state is still not a valid answer.
Absolutely, yeah. Does everybody kind of like agree, disagree in terms of being high, being drunk, or sleeping? Is it kind of like, is that an okay thing to do? Like, even if you are in a relationship, you guys are both like...
I think somewhere along the line, the lines get blurred, and you don't know where to sit there and draw that line between, okay, you know what, are we pushing it too far? And I think for a lot of young men, they're not socialized around it. Like, they will sit there and have conversations with young women about what they should accept, what they shouldn't accept, how they should respect themselves and carry themselves. But who's having those conversations with young men? So I guess, like, we'll use an example. Like, you could have like two kids small like this, and little boys running around grabbing up this girl, grabbing up that girl, and everyone will be like, oh, that's cute, he's gonna be jealous. And then the little girl might hug a little boy, and all of a sudden everyone's on her about that. But why weren't you on the little boy from the time he was like this tall to sit there and say, no, you can't be grabbing up the girl's backside or trying to cop a feel already? Like,
Right.
Like, why weren't you teaching him no from then? Then all of a sudden he's like 16, 17, and he's in situations with young women and he doesn't actually understand what that no looks like.
Right. Exactly. No, I love that you kind of took the conversation there, because we talk about socializing both those genders, right? We're talking about how we respond to how males are expected to act around certain situations. Like, it's okay for boys or for men to act a certain way, but females don't have that permission, right? We have to watch what we say, watch how we're dressing, watch how we're talking, like, and so when you say, we should have more of those conversations, I'm curious to know what does that conversation look like?
For me, if I had free reign to set up that conversation, I would say it'd just be like maybe two separate conversations with like the boys on one end, the girls on one end, and then bring them together and create that space where the girls can look at the guy and be like, yo, don't think I'm not going to feel disrespected when you told me I'm gang or I'm a battery or I'm all these other things, right? And I think the guys need to be challenged on that too, because a lot of guys will sit there and talk about girls being gang and don't even realize them participating in that might lead to them inadvertently committing an act of rape and not even knowing that, because they might be going in there on the assumption that the girl's saying yes, when maybe the girl was just too scared to say no in the first place.
So, like, you mean like in terms of like if comments are being made towards her about her, like the way that she looks and insinuating a battery, it's kind of what you're saying, right? Yeah. So that's kind of like the person being basically a bystander is what that is, right? When you're seeing or you're hearing certain things around you and you're not saying anything about it, you're kind of just as guilty as the person who is acting that way, right? So it kind of, like, as you said, it kind of sets them up to be part of that the rape culture, right? When we're looking at like the language that's being used.
Yeah, you could go anywhere, you could go to any party or whatever, but I think you should just think about what could happen and put yourself in good situations. Like, if you're out by yourself at a party, why would you be drinking excessively when you know there's nobody there to bring you home or anything? So it's like females and males also need to be conscious and like make good decisions while they're out. They can't just drink and expect nothing to happen. I'm not saying stuff is gonna happen, but in the society we live in,
Right.
there's likely that it's gonna happen. You need to make sure you're safe.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. I'm aware also that safety looks different for everybody, because the way that a female would think about her safety would be different in terms of how a male would think about his safety.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, for example, me personally, if I were to go to any type of event, I would make sure to leave earlier and to keep away from any type of drugs or alcohol, especially if I'm by myself.
Okay.
So
Or to
my
make sure
question
to have
that
company
would be-
with me.
It's good that you recognize all those safety pieces, but why should the responsibility of safety only fall on the young woman?
And so that's why I had said that it looks different for females as it would for males, right? Because while I think it's it's necessary rather for females to think about, okay, who am I going with? Am I going to these environments with people that I trust? How much am I drinking? Am I going to drink at all? Am I going to smoke weed? How much is my limit? Am I going to put myself in a situation where I'm secluded, where I don't have access to help if I need that? So I think that conversation for sure is very much needed. But let's kind of, like as you said, turn the tables to males. So how would males also walking into a situation think about their safety, and what things should they be thinking about before they even get to a scenario that looks like that, where there possibly could be sex happening?
I honestly don't think a lot of men think about their own safety in that regard. Me personally, I think the only time I may have thought of my safety, and I don't even think it was necessarily me thinking of my safety. I remember being around, I think it was my grade 9 year of high school. There was these two girls that everybody, like amongst my peer group, were trying to talk to, and me and this one guy made it sort of like a competition to see like if the girl would give us her attention. And somewhere along the process of that, we ended up going back to their neighborhood, and we didn't even actually realize that the girl that we were flirting with had basically lined up her friend for the guys to do whatever with.
Wow.
And as much as I was flirting with this girl, I was like the shy boy amongst my peer group. So I was sitting like, I caught wind of what was going on, and I'm standing and I'm watching. I'm like, okay, I should leave, right? And I ended up leaving the house despite knowing what was going on, and despite the fact that like I even at one point the girl had actually said no, right? And I remember going home, and I remember going to my mom and telling her what happened, and asking her if I did the right thing, like by leaving. And my mom said, yeah. And I'm like, but the girl was still in the house. She's like, no, because those same people that said they were your friends, there was like 10 or 11 of them in the house. What would you have done if they turned around and crushed you now? Oh, because now you're trying to stand up for this girl, right? And I think that was the only time safety came into that equation, was where it could have been turned around to physical harm on me, right? But at the end of the day, like, as much as I knew what was going on in the house was wrong, and that the girl had said no, I think at that point, I didn't have the courage to sit there and stand up to my friends and sit there and say, yo, like, what are you guys doing?
Right. Because then what would have happened if you did stand up, using that as an
That's I don't
example?
know. My mom's assumption was that my friends would turn around and jump to me. Right, so I think maybe the safety piece might fall into like guys not knowing where to draw the lines with their friends and what their friends are doing, and the peer pressure that comes with that, or necessarily wanting to fit in with that peer group.
Right. Yeah, so, because I'm sure there's thousands of scenarios that play out just like that today. And that doesn't change over time. Like when you, the story that you were telling was kind of like when you, like a couple of years ago, or when you were that age.
No, I'm old. I'm old. I'm just talking from something like that happened when I was a kid.
Yeah. And the same things are repeating today, right?
Yeah, I would, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it's important that we're having this conversation, because I don't think people that have been having the conversation, I don't think people have been actually wanting to actually talk about the different pieces of it. Like, so for instance, you mentioned rape culture, and she was talking about her drinking too much and whatnot, and people don't even realize the gray area that falls under, where a girl could sit there and say, yeah, I got raped, and then all of a sudden the police officer's asking her, well, how much did you have to drink? Like, does it really matter how much she had to drink? She was intoxicated. Like, that should have been a clear indication that it was no.
Right. Exactly. Because as we talked about earlier, if intoxicated, that's not consent because you're not consciously aware of to make a sound decision. You might be you might think that you're conscious enough to know where you are or who's with you, that kind of stuff, but you're really not in your in the right mind to make a conscious, positive decision, healthy decision, right? So that's kind of like what we mean when we talk about being conscious, right? So in those scenarios where we're talking about males being in a situation where, you know, you're with your friends, how do you even begin to like stand up for a female if you see that's something that's happening? When you have to think about your safety, right? Because we're still kind of on the topic of like how do males keep themselves safe?
I think again it falls down to like how we're socialized, and I don't know. I feel like our society with social media right now has everybody on this bandwagon where they have to fit in with everybody, and no one's actually like teaching someone to just know themselves and be strong in who they are. Because if you're strong in who you are, I think it's easier to sit there and say no to your friends or stand up in a situation that you know something's wrong, right? And then push on the next day and not have to worry about what anyone's going to say to you.
Right. Yeah, I think kind of as you're talking, and I thought kind of came to my mind that I don't think very many people know that like what sexual violence really looks like, to even recognize that that's something that might be taking place. Because there's only like, I've been working in the field of like sexual assault and working with survivors of sexual violence for quite some time, and it was only maybe about 2 years ago that I learned that catcalling was considered sexual violence. Does everyone kind of know what that term means? Yeah. Okay, so it's just to kind of show you that like not everybody is aware of like consent or what sexual violence looks like, or that it needs to be clear other than a verbal, because you mentioned earlier that like no means no, right? So sometimes people are not always aware of what that looks like. Because you might have, in that situation, just to kind of still use that as an example, you might have known that was wrong. But for other people, their level of awareness might be in a different place, right? So how do we kind of raise that awareness when it comes to, but that's not okay?
I think that's where it's like we need to create those spaces for like young women to demonstrate their own strength and their own worth, in the sense of saying, okay, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Because I think when we build them up in spaces to have that confidence, as soon as they leave that space and they want that young boy's attention, they're going to put up with him treating her a certain way or him calling her a certain way or whatever, right? And again, like, if we create that space where they get to inadvertently challenge them on it and call them on and hold them to account, I feel like the frankness of it will force them to take a step back and look at what it actually is.
Yeah. And that's an important part, because in healthy friendships too, if whoever you're hanging around with, like, I think it's important for you to be able to have the permission to even say like, yo, what are you doing? That's not okay. And for your friends to respect that's what you're saying. Because in other words, like, why are you hanging out with those people if they're not respecting your opinion? Should you be even being friends with people like that who don't stand up for what the right thing is? So when you are in a situation, when you are with someone and you say yes to begin with, does everyone kind of agree that like that doesn't mean that if that you can't change your mind in the middle of intercourse or towards the end or whatever the case is? Like,
yeah, you can. If you change your mind, then they have to accept that. You can't continue or force the person to keep going just because they said yes at first. If I change my mind, you just have to go with it. If you force me, you're gonna get the consequences.
Right. And what about if we say yes to sex in general, but there's other aspects or different things that we're doing during that we're not okay with.
I still think it's the same thing, the yes and no rule.
Mm-hmm.
If I say yes, yes means yes. If I say no, it means no.
Right. So both males and females have the right to say yes or stop or no at any point during sex.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's considered sexual violence. When you are not reading, so it's not even just about saying yes, because there's some situations where a female can say yes verbally, but her nonverbals, if you're not catching that, is saying I'm not completely comfortable, or that I'm not really sure, because sometimes in those moments it's kind of hard to actually say how you feel in the middle of. And I think that's kind of where the problem is that we're saying yes and everything's all good when we started, but then maybe I'm having a flashback, or maybe I'm just not in a good mood anymore, or maybe I'm just not feeling this anymore. Or maybe, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
that's kind of difficult because people express themselves in different ways non-verbally. So it's like that would be a conversation you'd have to have with the other person before you guys start.
Exactly. So let's say.
So yeah, communication is a big one as well.
Yeah. That's a huge piece, because not everybody has those conversations with their partners before they engage in sex, right? So if you are in a situation where you didn't have the conversation and you're with a girl or you're with a guy and you kind of sense that this person is not as excited as they were when we started, that's a clear indication that they're not feeling it anymore. So maybe you should check in and stop.
Yeah, maybe that should be something that's talked about, checking in. Because I've never, like, having a conversation like this, that's never popped up ever.
Mm-hmm.
So you suggest that every 15 minutes we check in? Are you still ready to go? Or every 10 minutes we check in and say, you still good? Still good?
So it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. It could be when you are in tune with your partner, right? Because sex is supposed to be something where you are present with the person. When you're present, you feel that, you sense it, you recognize it. So if you're having sex with someone and you're noticing that, like, it just, you know, like, they're not feeling it, they're not really paying attention, or maybe they're just not really into, like, you can tell if someone's enjoying something or not, right? And if you as a man or a woman, because sexual violence goes both ways too, if you sense that, say something and ask. I sense that you good, like, it seems like you're not feeling it, like, am I doing something wrong? Like check in with that's what I mean when I say check in with the person, right? I don't mean like, okay, it's 10 minutes, maybe I should, not like that. I just mean to be connected with your partner and to be able to sense those nonverbal cues that you're getting, because when we look at communication, majority of communication is about nonverbal. Only like 13% of communication is actual verbal. So,
but that might be a problem because a lot of young people aren't in tune with the person they're having sex with. They're just having sex to have sex, right? Mm. So do they really care about being in tune? I don't know. Right?
That's a good point.
Because not everybody's in a relationship, like partnership, especially when you're young. You're out there doing your thing.
Right.
Right.
So then, how would that conversation look like for people who are not necessarily, like, so what do those people do? The people who are not really in tune with themselves or with the partner that they're with, what do we say to those people?
Parents need to show their daughters more love too, I think. That's a whole other topic. But like, girls won't even be out there doing stuff if they are getting that love at home, right?
That's true. Would it be realistic to say, don't have sex then? If you don't have the skills to even, like, something as simple as being cognizant of what the other person is feeling or how they're presenting in front of you, should you even be having sex with them? Right? Is that realistic to say?
I don't know. I feel like that choice is on you. Like, if you want to do it, do it. Just, like, educate yourself first. if you don't want to do it, then don't do it.
What parts of the conversation you found interesting? If there was like parts that, you know, like you think that we should focus on? Because like I recognize that sometimes there's just so much to talk about when we talk about consent. So like what part of the conversation did you find like helpful, or something you didn't know or you want to talk more about?
Something I want to talk more about is conscious. Like
Okay.
being in the right state of mind and being asked a question.
I see. Okay. So in terms of the consent,
Yeah.
right? Because like you've heard kind of before about being clear, like through the conversation that we just had about what clear consent looks like. Someone that's like
Yeah.
really excited, and the conscious part. That's kind of like where you feel like that there's kind of like a gray area with that, the conscious part. Okay. So like in terms of like do you mean like do you have questions about like being high or drunk or sleeping or?
Yeah, I just feel like more people should be aware that when someone's not in the right state of mind, that the things that they're saying they don't really mean.
So let's just say that you are kind of like with friends. You guys are like at a party. It was like a girl's birthday. She had some friends there, and you kind of like met someone there, and like you're really into her, but you're not really sure.
Mhm.
And she's not. You get the hint that like she's not that comfortable,
Yeah.
right? So how would you approach that scenario?
Well, they're not comfortable around me or someone else.
Like to that point where like you guys are talking and then you're about to hook up, right? So like what approach would you take in that scenario?
Before hooking up, I asked her if she's okay and if she wants to do this. And also about her body language. Making sure the communication between us is clear. And if anything, if not at the moment, maybe make another day when she feels ready.
Okay. So kind of like you'd like set up like another day that you guys can like go
Yeah.
out kind of thing?
Like get a number, social media, talk to her, and then when she was ready, meet up with her and yeah.
Okay. So why do you think guys are not being very aware of the state that they're either in themselves, like, or the state of another female?
Well, I'm guessing they might be too into the moment to realize, but I'm not really sure.
Okay. So kind of getting the sense that like they're into the moment in terms of like, in terms of them being intoxicated, in terms of them just like really feeling the girl, so they're not thinking of anything else. Like, what do you think?
It could be both.
Yeah. Do you have like any questions when it comes to the other parts of consent, or the whole like rape culture or sexual violence? Like when you think of that.
I don't have any questions right now.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for like your feedback and for like giving some good pointers. Because I think that there's a lot of young men that could learn from, you know, things that you said, the way that you are, the fact that, you know, you respect females, and earlier you talked about like being, you know, you catch their nonverbals, you want to make sure that they're okay. Yeah, and I think that's amazing. And I hope that you, I hope that you influence whoever you're around, and you spread the message, because it's a huge topic that needs to be addressed. And yeah, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you so much everyone here for your input. I really appreciate all the feedback, the questions, allowing me to come into your space and talk about sexual consent and what that looks like. And I hope that those who are viewing also learned something from this conversation.